believe occurred in early October. I think that's the 4th of October, 2011. Of course, if I was to draw the projected path of the 18-month cycle, if I drew it in very simplistic terms, it would be a semicircle, okay, which is expected to go something like that and head down to a trough. And that trough is expected, as you can see, sometime early in 2013. All right. That means that based purely on that semicircle, that means that you can see quite clearly that the 18-month cycle is approaching what is probably going to prove to be the peak of the 18-month cycle. Okay, that's in a very simplistic sort of a picture. Okay. Cycles, of course, aren't semicircles. Cycles play out in financial markets very much like the capital letter M. And let me show you. This is a more realistic picture of what a cycle in a financial market looks like. Okay, it causes prices to move upwards, and prices then form a first peak, and then prices fall down into an intermediate trough, which is the trough of, in this case, the 40-week cycle. Then they rise and they form a second peak before finally falling down into the final trough of the cycle. Okay, so given that context, knowing that cycles form S-shapes in the market, what is the current 18-month cycle actually doing? Well, it is presently moving. It's presently approaching, I should say, the point at which the intermediate trough should be forming, the trough of the 40-week cycle. Okay, so we're in the first part of that M shape at the moment. Where are we in that M shape? Have we seen the highest price yet in the 18-month cycle, or is price going to go up a little bit higher and still form a yet higher peak and then come down into the 40-week cycle? Well, that's something that I'm going to try to answer in today's trader chat, in terms of what is really happening in the finer detail. So let's zoom in and take a look at the next cycle down. This is a constant process that one does when working with Hurst cyclic principles. You take a look at one cycle, then you look at the shorter cycle, then you look in more detail at the yet shorter cycle, and so on and so forth. So, taking a look at the 40-week cycle, which is the next shorter cycle from the 18-month cycle, what has been happening in the 40-week cycle? Well, the 40-week cycle will also form a sort of an idealized M shape. Okay, and there it is. And so as you can see, the 40-week cycle has passed this intermediate trough over here. Okay, which was the trough of the 20-week cycle. So we're in the second half of the M shape, if you like, of the 40-week cycle. I see Nagaraj indicates that audio is getting disturbed. Please let me know if you're having general audio problems. I have taken all the steps that I can take to improve audio on this end. Let me see if I can just. Okay, so we're having some audio problems. Let me just delay and see if I can do something to improve the audio slightly from here. And let me just confirm that I have stopped things which cause extra drain on the output from my office. All right. Well, let me know if the audio problems continue. I hope they won't. I've taken a few steps to improve the quality of the audio. Not too bad in the UK. Well, let me go. If a bit of audio goes missing, just ask me to repeat myself, and I will try to do that. Okay. So we were having a look at the shape of the current 40-week cycle and asking the question, where are we in that 40-week cycle? And the 40-week cycle is expected to form an M shape, okay, with the center part of the M always lined up with the trough of the 20-week cycle, which you can see over there. And the peak, or the first peak of the M shape, as you can see, occurred way back in late October last year. So it was a very, very early peak, and so price is now heading up towards the second peak, which is the second peak of the M shape. So the question is, where is that second peak going to occur? Oh dear, I see you have audio problems in the UK as well. Unfortunately, there's very little that I can do that I haven't done already to improve the quality of the audio. So please let me know if things don't resolve. It is much better now. Okay, good. All right. Well, hopefully those steps I took have improved things a little bit. Okay, so where are we? Okay, so as you can see, the market has bounced out of a 20-week cycle trough, which occurred in early March, according to this analysis, in early March of this year, and it's been bouncing out and is about to form a peak of the current 20-week cycle and start heading downwards. So as always, we then move on and take a look at the next shorter cycle, which is the 20-week cycle. So let's zoom in and start looking in detail at the current 20-week cycle so that we get a real picture of what's happening right now. I see Jitendra says the bottom of the middle part of the M is nearly as high as the first peak. The bottom of the middle part of the M is nearly as high as the first peak. Okay, let me just go back there. Okay, I see Craig is also having some issues with audio, and he suggests logging out and logging back in again in reference to the 40-day cycle. Okay, all right. Yes, Jitendra, I think I know what you're saying. And if you're speaking about the 40-day cycle, then we'll get there in a moment. We're still stepping down through the cycle. So let's take a look at the 20-week cycle. When I get the 40-day cycle, then I think I know what you're saying, and I will make a few comments about that. Okay. So what's happening with the 20-week cycle? Well, the 20-week cycle, of course, formed a trough in early March and rose up to a peak in looks like the first week of April, and then came down and formed the intermediate trough, the middle part of the M, in about 2 weeks ago in the second week of April, and it has now been rising to form the second peak, the second peak in the current. I'm drawing the 80-day cycle over here. Of course, the 20-week cycle. Let me just zoom out a little bit so that I can show you the 20-week cycle. There we go. Okay, so the 20-week cycle bounced from a trough there and is expected to form a peak sometime soon and then come down to the trough of the 80-day cycle, okay, before going on and finishing its M shape. So we're in the first part of the M shape on the 20-week cycle, which, if we have a look in more detail, is, of course, the current 80-day cycle. And here is the 80-day cycle, which bounced out of the trough in early March, formed the first peak in the first week of April, came down to form the second part of the M, has now been moving up to form the second peak, which is expected sometime soon, and then it's going to move down and form a trough of the 80-day cycle sometime in the middle of May. So what is actually happening right now? Well, the market is moving up, of course, as we can see, and is expected to form a peak fairly soon, and then it should move down and move down towards the peak of the 40-day and the 80-day cycle. Okay. let me clear that and take a look in even greater detail at the 40-day cycle and the shorter cycles. What's happening with the 40-day cycle? Well, the 40-day cycle formed a trough on the 11th of April, and our last Oz Trader chat took place on the 12th of April, and you will remember that here on the 12th of April, we were speaking about the fact that the 40-day cycle was expected to form a trough, but we did not expect it to be very bullish because of the underlying trend circumstances. Of course, price has bounced out of there, and in fact it has been surprisingly bullish, that bounce out of the 40-day cycle, which we should speak about, because it's been a very interesting move, and it's been a move that has diverged from the US markets. But let's take a look at what's happening now with the 40-day cycle. It has bounced out of this trough on the 11th of April and has been heading up ever since. Okay. Now, what's the next thing that's meant to be happening in terms of the cyclic picture? Well, as you can see, there was a 10-day cycle trough which occurred here on the 17th of April, and then another 5-day cycle trough which occurred here on the 20th of April. And so next thing that is expected, as you can see from the bottom of the chart, is that the market is going to form a trough of the 20-day cycle. Now, it is not impossible that that trough of the 20-day cycle could have occurred just a few days ago. Where are we now? We are now on the 26th. So it's possible that that trough of the 20-day cycle could have occurred, a very subtle, small trough, could have occurred on the 24th of April, only 2 days ago on Tuesday. And let's take a look at evidence whether that 20-day cycle trough has occurred. First of all, we can measure the distance. The distance from the previous trough on the 11th of April to Tuesday, the 24th of April, was